another episode of DevX, and I am super excited about today's episode for three reasons. Yeah, one is we have Dhruvi Shah, who is the CEO of Axis Bank Foundation, one of India's largest CSR foundations that invests over 100 crores per year in social impact. Second reason is I am always very interested to learn how banks and financial institutions do their CSR, because I think they do it in a very unique way, which is very aligned to the core of what they do. So that kind of brings a different richness in their program. So I'm keen to learn about that. And the third reason is that Dhruvi and I have actually prepped very deeply for this. We had multiple exchanges on what we should talk about, challenged each other on saying what would add value to you who's seeing this. So yeah, I'm very excited to welcome you here today, Dhruvi. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us.
Yeah. Thank you, Varda, for inviting me. And it's a pleasure to be here to have this conversation after all the other conversations we've had. We are hoping I can make some sense to all your questions. But yes, glad to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. So Dhruvi, while we've had multiple prep chats, allow me to formally also just introduce DevX to you and why we started the podcast, right? So we primarily started DevX to help non-profits that work in different thematic areas. So it could be livelihood, health, skilling, agri. We wanted them to understand the CSRs and the donors that work in this space better, right? Not just what you do, but also what you think and how you approach impact and social welfare. So this, we feel, will help them learn about you. It will help them be more meaningful to you when they engage. So that's the difference we're trying to make. And does it make sense? What do you think?
Yeah, so social is a very, how should I say, overused word and slightly confusing. I think the large impact that we all try and create is more an economic and an ecological impact. Yeah, see, social issues are very personal to a community, right? It's not fair for an outsider or a corporate to influence. You can try and create better opportunities, but we don't really get into the social challenges of, we get into the economic challenges, we get into the ecological challenges or any other challenges that impact the functioning of many things, better lives, better livelihoods. But social is typically about how the society functions, right? We can't really change that until the society or the community decides to do that. You can educate them, make them aware. We call it social space from our perspective, but for that community, we are trying to solve an economic and an ecological problem. I think it's important to keep this difference in mind when we talk of the word social.
I think that's very well put, Dhruvi. So economic and ecological challenges of, I think, especially the bottom of the pyramid is how you define social and how you look at social. Yes. So for the purpose of this episode, whenever I say social, that's what I mean. Awesome. Now let's jump right into it. So Axis Bank does some amazing work, I think, in four key areas, right? So you work in watershed management and agri. You work in livestock enhancement. So naturally, rural development forms a big part of what you do. You work in vocational training. And then you do work in livelihoods for people with disability. So very briefly, if you could just touch upon those. I say briefly because what I will do is we will put the link to your website. You have a very beautiful self-explanatory website. So people can always log in there and look at that. We'll get into deeper things, but briefly introduce us.
We started in 2006 with the intent of seeing how we can contribute as a business. How do you give back to the society? And the foundation was set up so that we could give it that rigor. Again, it's bankers thinking that anything that you do needs product, process, approach, strategy, accountability. So we set up a separate foundation. Like a very new foundation, we also started working on what we saw as immediate challenges. We started investing in education. We invested in a very important program then, was a highway trauma care program. And it was also part of our learning journey. And a couple of years down the line, we realized that a lot of issues that communities face is related to the quality of life and livelihoods. That's how we pivoted to focusing on changing opportunities around livelihoods, addressing the challenges around livelihood. And again, these challenges were largely present in the rural India. And that's where we kind of pivoted. CSR is not a very large pool of money. It's a small pool of money with great power. So that's where we focused on. And since 2010, it's almost 13 years now, our focus through the foundation has been on livelihoods.
Mhm.
Um, we call it lives and livelihoods, but yes, primary outcome that we hold ourselves accountable for is creating opportunities for better livelihoods and see how they sustain over a long period of time. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
Amazing. And you have a really large vision for this also that you kind of drive towards and hold yourself accountable to. Mission 2 million. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we wanted to have a goal for ourselves. So when we look at 2 million in context of the problem, is not a very large amount, but as a funder to a solution, it's a fairly large part. And we wanted to be ambitious and we wanted to set a number, though it doesn't stop at the 2 million, but having that number gives us a goalpost. So it's not just a number, we also have what that number should be in terms of income and how it's going to sustain, right? So that's the detail part of it. But yes, we do have a number for us. It's called Mission 2 Million. So we will be supporting 2 million households, rural families, improve their lives and livelihoods over a 6-7 year period. We are somewhere at 1.3 right now. Typically, we work with the family for about 3 to 4 years and then with the collectives for another couple of years. So that's what it takes. That's the big mission for us.
So, Dhruvi, actually, that's very interesting. And because that number is actually, I think, a little bit misrepresentative. I'll tell you why. Because when you talk about rural India and you're talking about 2 million households, on an average, you can say at about 4 to 5 people per household, the number of lives you're actually impacting is about 5x of that. So,
Yeah.
that's quite a big number in itself. I would say, yes, of course, in the context of the population, I get where you're coming from, but amazing.
So yeah, we can keep counting because there is a huge ripple effect. There's a huge cascading impact. And you're right. There is an impact to the family. There's an impact to the community. There's an impact on the local economy as well, or the local ecology. And that's where sustainability comes in. Is when you have a larger cascade which is engaged with the system. So the impact is much higher than the 2 million families that we are talking about.
Amazing. So, Dhruvi, tell me something. What kind of partners do you work with to chase this big mission that you have?
So when we started designing what we wanted to do, a lot of it was in consultation with people in the sector. How do you understand what is required, right? As a bank, we do have a fair understanding of economic indicators of how, let's say, how rural businesses operate, how agriculture is understood. And as a bank, we're also good investors. We know how to invest, right? What we didn't know, and that is what we relied on the experts, is to know what is the problem a fund like CSR can solve, right? I mean, I can use the fund to, uh, let's say, so this is something we keep using all the time. Is we don't give fish, we teach people how to fish. It's very simple, cliche to an extent, but that's what we do now. Trying to understand the difference between where is it that is going to end up giving the fish versus where is the teaching required. I think that knowledge we did not carry, and that's the knowledge we relied and learned, and then co-created with organizations who had this knowledge, organizations who have been set up by individuals, by group of people to to work with the community. See, until you go to the community, you do not realize or you do not understand what is the challenge that I can address. So there are organizations who have for years been with the community, evolved in pace with the changing challenges, and it changes over a period of time. So we select partners who have the core knowledge of what it requires on the ground. It's a very complex. It's a society you are engaging with, right? It's as complex as any society. You're dealing with people. You're dealing with families. So the sensitivity you need to be able to transfer things. We work with organizations who have developed those systems, right?
Got it.
And we built on that. So our entire program, yes, we brought in certain knowledge that was core to us, the knowledge about people, the knowledge about what works, what doesn't work, what will not work, or let's try this. All of that has we've fully relied on our partners, and we've also learned along the way. We understand that much better now. So it's this combination of knowledge that results into a good partnership for us.
Amazing. And I think you also have very long standing partnerships. The organizations have grown with you over long periods of time. And how many organizations do you work with broadly?
We work with about 30, 31 organizations.
Wow. So that's a deep, deep investment that you make in the organizations. It's not scattered, it's not ad hoc.
No, it takes a while to
Yeah.
come to a common understanding.
Correct.
I think it takes a while to understand how synced are we
Mm,
with the community,
mm,
their aspiration, their challenges,
mm.
and what can we do as outsiders with it, and how much is the community open to be able to. It's a three-way partnership. So these are
Mm.
all factors that decide the partnership.
Sure. So tell me something, Dhruvi. Now you've had so much experience because you've done so many programs, so many projects, so many pilots. You've also spoken of things that worked. Tell me something about things that didn't work. What's the role of failures in impact programs, in social programs out there? Tell me a little bit about your experiences with
There's
that.
too many jargons, social programs, impact programs, failures. No.
Sub kaat denge. We'll remove all of it at the end. But tell me the role of failures in success.
So success and failure are not two sides of the coin.
Okay.
Success is what a community will accept, adopt, right? What will work is based on a series of experiments.
Mm.
Which combination will work? At what time will it work?
Mm.
Right?
Mm.
That's a design issue, right? For
Fair.
example, let's say if I have to meet the community, what is the time I really need to go and talk to him? It's 5 o'clock in the morning or 8:30 in the evening.
Mm.
That's the time when he's free. Is this throughout the country the same? Across the seasons, it is not.
No.
When do I, if I have to speak to a woman farmer or a woman, rural woman, what is the time I need to go meet her? Right? Now, I'm just taking this as an example.
Sure.
It is this knowledge of how things operate in your geography that you are targeting that significantly determines what will work. Right? It's that finer nuances, which is where ears on the ground, which is where partners who understand this, who believe that we have to go and meet the community at the time they are available and not at our office time, which is a 9 to 5, and I will only start at 9 and come back by 5. That's not going to work. Right?
Fair.
So, how you design your solution with what intelligence decides the degree of adoptability and therefore a degree of success. And that comes back to our question of selecting partners. Are people who understand this deeply? It's not a static solution. It's continuous learning, unlearning, relearning, because their lives are as dynamic as our. In fact, their lives are more dynamic than our lives.
Correct.
Right? One bad rainfall and the village dynamics change completely.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
Superb. I think that was
A long answer.
enlightening. That was enlightening, eye-opening. So long is totally worth it. So what geographies do you work in?
So we work in areas where livelihood challenges are higher than others. And what boiled down to is we are working in areas which, one, are rain-fed, which means they don't have a irrigation system, they don't have the access to water for irrigation. And a lot of areas are the central India belt, where there's a large proportion of communities who are tribals.
Okay.
So that's a large proportion of where our work goes. But we also want to now expand to other agroecological zones and climates. And we will, as we expand, we will also sort of move to those areas, because every topography, for lack of a better word, has a different challenge. So hills have a very different challenge.
Correct.
The operating models are different because you have valley-based organizations and travel has to be kept in mind. So all of those factors, coastal, for example, has very different challenges. Northeast has very different challenges. So we are aspiring to move to these areas.
And currently, how many states do you work in?
I think as such, 26 states.
Wow.
But largely we are present in the central
The
India,
central-
Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Orissa, West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Assam, Meghalaya, we have a little presence in Karnataka. So broadly, that's where the livelihood program is.
I think a shorter list will be where don't you work?
No, there are many places we don't work. And
States, I mean.
more than state, I think we also have a saturation model where we saturate a block. We try and
Okay.
saturate a block because two parts to our program is also about supporting the community to leverage government programs and market
Okay.
resources. And both of these, the government linkage has a administrative boundary, so block becomes a good unit. And markets, you need aggregation. There also you need a unit. So block is what we look at as a geographical boundary.
So that's a very interesting point that you just made. And I'm curious because I heard in something else about you where you said that actually non-profits and not-for-profit projects are actually not designed for scale. What do you mean by that? Because everything that you've said in the last couple of minutes is actually such high scale. So just make sense of that for me.
Okay, interesting perspectives. Okay, let's take a step back and let's understand what is. I mean, why does an NGO or a civil society organization exist in the first place?
Okay.
I think that would give you a lot of clarity on what is their purpose. They're called social purpose organization. They're called
Correct.
NGO, civil society, all of that, right? So as any society grows, there will be issues that remain unaddressed, right?
Hmm.
In various degrees that impact your lives and livelihoods. Typically, civil society organization is representative of people, right? Who will say, okay, this is the problem that is somehow not still getting solved.
Mhm.
How can we solve this problem? What can be the mechanism that can be put in place?
Hmm.
Where is the policy gap? Because the country is also making policies to solve the same problems, right? But
Correct.
at the scale and the diversity in our country, some things are going to be left out, or an outcome of a very good intended program, there is something which is going to be not working. Civil society is sort of, you could call it a watchdog, you could call it an assessment outside the realm and see, okay, this is a problem we are facing. Can we solve it this way? And this is
Hmm.
how we can solve it,
Hmm.
which is then shared with other stakeholders to see if it can be mainstream.
Hmm.
So, for example, there used to be a program called Food for Work. The whole Sarva Siksha Abhiyan, MNREGA, a lot of it came as experiments in the civil society, saying,
Hmm.
can this be an option? And conversations with government, conversation with people leads to mainstreaming. So it's not as simple as I'm kind of sound. So it's a very integrated process, right? So you create those possible solutions, you pilot
Hmm.
it, fail, you succeed, whatever, and then which is where you would hear about policy advocacy, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Policy advocacy is nothing but present saying that this is going to work, this is the policy we need. Can we do these changes in the policy? Can it work better? Right? So that's how it operates. So the role of civil society is to make these solutions, create the solutions,
Hmm.
present it to stakeholders, and see if it can be integrated. At
Hmm.
some point, the role of civil society also changes over a period of time. So we are
Correct.
nobody's solving the same problem it did few years ago. Project is a management mechanism,
Correct.
right? So scale cannot happen there. The scale we are talking about is certain solutions also need volumes to pilot or test that model.
Hmm.
That's why there is a certain element of scale required when I'm solving certain problems. Which is why I
Got.
said for us, block is a big enough boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. Makes so much sense. So now I understand the backdrop in which you made that statement. So it's a project is more like a deep demonstrative pilot where you pivot, you see what works, you're able to gather evidence, present evidence, and then when it is adopted, that's when the scale
So it's
happens.
also, it's not always that it has to be adopted by the government. Sometimes
Sure.
people don't accept solutions. So
Correct.
you have these very nice government programs that are there in place.
Hmm.
The community has not been able to take the advantage of it because they don't know how to integrate all of this at the community level, at the village level. So how do you help that part also?
Got it.
Being there, being on the ground, I think that's the role of civil society.
Got it. Well, now that we've understood scale a little bit more deeply, right, I want to talk a little bit also about technology. I want to talk about technology. What role does it play in Axis Bank Foundation at two levels? One is Axis Bank Foundation itself. How do you use technology? How do you leverage technology for yourself as an organization and as a donor? Second is how do you use it in your projects, in your programs on ground? So tell us a little bit about that.
So, as a fund manager, the technology we use and is used most usable for us is to manage our fund. Right? We have a little technology solution that we do. But importantly, it's very similar to what I said in the past is we will have to pilot technology solutions. How do we bring technology at the grassroots to solve some of the problems? So, but it's large investment, right? It is a long-term investment that you need.
Correct.
I don't think we are yet geared up to invest that kind of money. I mean, it will enable efficiency. It's a first mover problem is who's going to take the first step. But there are solutions that are coming up, right? The how do we scale the solution up? I am not really sure how that is going to happen unless the government is going to integrate it. How long can it run on grants? So these are the smaller problems. But technology can help solve many, many problems today, which we are not able to yet get our heads fully around. So the basic, let me say, where we use technology or where we've seen users, and after COVID, two things that have helped. One is the network, availability of network, right? I mean, we've been traveling for now 16, 17 years. There were days when we could not be any touch. I mean, there was no signal. But now, even in the deepest part of the country, you'll have signal. That's a huge opportunity. Second, a lot of households now have at least one smartphone. Phone definitely सबके पास है, smartphone भी है, and that's a huge opportunity again to reach directly to the community who is either is a stakeholder, right? Is a customer for a corporate or for a business or for the government, population, citizen, whatever. So that's an opportunity. Information, money flow, transaction, everything can happen. Awareness. Third part is community knows that this is going to help them change for better. They learn from, I think YouTube is the most used app. I think that's a great opportunity. And how are we as people going to leverage this for transformation? I think the ball lies in our court.
Correct. That's actually so interesting what you said, few of the points that you made. So in the interest of wrapping our head around technology, it's also important to kind of leverage technology in ways which are cost efficient, right, and cost effective. That is the real key there, because technology can actually it's actually leverage. It can, if used right, become a multiplier effect to the impact that we create. Yeah, so that's so important, I feel, for us to understand as a sector and know how to use it. Right? That's I think the key. In fact, I was having a conversation recently with AWS, Amazon Web Services, and what they're doing is they've taken it now upon themselves to create an entire division serving nonprofits. So they kind of feel that the social sector can benefit a lot from technology. They're in a learning exercise right now, and their point of view is that this has to be looked at differently. We have to learn saying what will work here for this sector, right? So how do we build solutions that can really work for the sector? They're okay to rebuild, relook, reimagine what the sector needs so that they can kind of deliver all of this.
It's not what the sector needs, it's what people need.
The community needs.
Yeah, correct. NGOs, like I said, for us, we are a fund manager. Our use of technology is going to be limited, right? Again, when we go back to the NGO, it's a platform of transfer.
Correct.
Right? Maybe they will need a little more data to manage or whatever. But it's correct. A community. So if you're able to provide solutions for a community that a community can use, I think that's where the opportunity lies. So I think we need to look at the user, the community as a recipient of the benefit of the technology. Otherwise, it's going to focus on the low-hanging fruit is information. Information to what end? I mean, there's no end to information. Correct. I think it's very important. A lot of conversations right now around we can get you data, data stack is another word I'm hearing now. But how is it going to help the community?
Right.
Right? What are the dashboards that are going to help me decide better for the community? Correct. How is it going to help the community get information faster, know how to use that information, transfer back what happens with that information? That's the space technology needs to look at more than for the sector as a whole, because it's too large.
Makes sense. So tell me something, Dhruvi. So now you run a lot of programs on ground with your partners. So would it be helpful to do a workshop for your partners, or maybe even for your team, where we can give an immersion to the various different, for example, technology solutions that are there and how they can help in
Yeah,
programs,
why
how they can
not?
help communities,
Why not?
and kind of figure that out. Is that something that you feel will help you?
It's always good to learn and know what's there. And as much as everything is online, I think we don't really know everything. So it'll be good to have more targeted access to information about solution. If somebody has created, why not?
Great. So let me try, as a happy outcome of this exchange, let me try and see if we can facilitate something on that front so that everybody wins. I'm sure hearing from the ground and hearing from the stakeholders in the grassroots is also a reverse exchange that's going to be very valuable.
I think
Let's
that's
let's see
what
if we
we
can do
can
this.
offer is an exchange. We can validate some of those. We can run trials or whatever. But I think
Yeah.
it's important to, when post COVID, I think there's a very large consciousness about. I think we all realized we don't know everything. We are not solving it. It's a great reality check that has happened, and I'm seeing huge difference in the conversation post COVID. Collaborations are more collaborative, both in letter and spirit, and it starts with the realization we don't know everything and we are not doing enough, and we can do better. So I think there's a huge opportunity to now at least hear each other out and see where we can do
Yeah.
things together.
Great. So I'm taking this as a personal project. So let me see if we can facilitate something here for your partners and something great comes out of it. Now, moving onwards, there was also another area that I was very keen on understanding a little bit more about your programs because it's an area that I am very passionate about. I like to talk about areas of intersection, areas of inclusion, and you do some very, very interesting programs in inclusion, in working with people with disability and skilling them. Can you tell us a little bit about your work with people with disability? What do you
Sure.
do
So, two parts. Yes, we do have a program where we look at specifically for inclusion for people with disability in the workforce.
there?
But inclusion as such is a large part of our work, many forms of inclusion. So, I'll first talk about people with disability. So, we all know that people with disabilities have very few opportunities to be part of a mainstream workforce. And it's almost like a movement now, both on
Correct.
the demand and the supply side. And what our program facilitates is building capacity to enter the workforce.
Hmm?
But the more important part is to create conducive work environment in the place of work for inclusion, because the responsibility, again a cliched sentence, the responsibility for inclusion lies with those included, right? So it's our
Absolutely.
responsibility to not only create a conducive workspace but have a career path. That's true inclusion. It's inclusion actually starts once the person is placed on a job, once
Very
somebody has
true.
found a job, right? So we work in that space, but there's a lot of work required. But there's much more awareness, there's much more
Mhm.
openness. So people are changing, right? Your workplaces are changing. You have to be mindful of very, very many things. But inclusion is much, much, much wider than just people with disability.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it is happening that everybody is now focusing on it. So it'll happen, and at some point we'll not even realize that this was such a bigger problem. Yeah,
I hope so.
yeah. No, the world is becoming more conscious about inclusion, about exclusion. The understanding is much better, is growing, is now integrated into everyday being and feeling and talking, right? So we are much more conscious in that way.
Fabulous. And such a nice conversation to have on Disability Pride Month. It just struck me. Thank you so much for that. I was really wanting to get your point of view on this one. Now, moving on, the other thing that I really wanted to speak to you about. Now, this is an area of mutual passion, redefined definitions. So I want to, you know where I'm getting at.
So
So
what you've taken out of the conversation. Anyway, let's.
no, that's not so. But jokes apart, I want to spend a few minutes talking to you and hearing from you about your passion for social enterprises, and in your free time, you also like to mentor social enterprises. So tell us something about that because that's a very related space, but a very different kind of approach to it. So tell me about your work with social enterprises. What do you do? What do you like to do?
For the conversation, I'll use the word social enterprise, though I don't agree to many things in the word social. I meet those who work in this space because that's the people I will meet.
Yeah.
And which are the people that typically need mentoring are people whose business models are yet shaping up. So I'm a good mentor to startups,
Mhm.
enterprises who work in the space that I'm familiar with, whose customers are people we also associate with. We are familiar with the environment in which the problem exists, and it is a lot of understanding of how the mechanics of community operate, in
Mhm.
which the product or the services can exist, and that's the skill I transfer through mentoring.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So tell me something. Now this is something which is a bit of a harebrained little thought that I have, and I just want to understand. Hey, what's your take on it? So there are a lot of enterprises like this that you've how you've defined it that are working in areas which are aligned, right? So it could be healthcare, it could be livelihood, it could be skilling, particularly focused, as you so beautifully put it, in the economic and ecological challenges faced by the bottom of the pyramid, right? So it's not just about creating a health tech machine, it's about making it affordable to the people that need it the most. That in a way is a very good qualifier to see, hey, is this the social enterprise or just an enterprise in health, right? I think that's a bit of a
That's fair.
qualifier.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
Uh,
So and that's fair, and that's credit to you. My thinking has refined over our conversations. But having said that, so I've also found a significant miss that enterprises like this haven't seemed to have found a rightful space in the delivery of solutions. So if there is an enterprise like this that's working, let's take agri, right? You work a lot in agri, and they're creating solutions that help, for example, a small landholding farmer do something more efficiently, save money, save on resources, increase their outputs, and they want to work with your implementing partners and with Access Bank Foundation on saying, hey, we market-based solutions. I'm not talking about you funding them, right? That's a whole different point. Market-based solutions where ultimately it can be adopted by the market, free market principles. So if they want to work on solutions like that, is that something that you might find interesting to do?
See, we are a gateway to the community.
Hmm.
Our NGO partners is a gateway of introducing some of these solutions to the customer, and
Hmm.
that's about it. Usually, people approach us because for funding,
Hmm.
social enterprises, right? They don't approach us to find clients because today I don't think many of them have a proposition
Hmm.
which a farmer is ready to pay.
Hmm.
So that's the challenge, right? I mean, we are yet to create. I think nobody's investing in the cost efficiency part of it because there is a cost of delivery, there is a product development cost, and then a
Correct.
customer has to pay for it. So even
Correct.
microfinance has gone through this journey where it was also subsidized in many ways when it started. So that kind of subsidy is heavily required for what you call as enterprises trying to solve difficult problems, right?
Hmm.
So I think, I mean, Amul didn't. Amul also was supported heavily, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
likewise, you need that blanket. You need a lot of how should I say low cost capital
Hmm.
to make it affordable for the farmer. So microfinance is a good example to learn from. But the
Hmm.
difference is microfinance was one product.
Hmm. Got it.
Today there are many good solutions coming out, but it's still not remunerative enough for the farmer. What we
Hmm.
could do is we can help with demonstrations.
Hmm.
Say, okay, this is how, or probably pilot test it.
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
you really need is patient capital,
Correct. Correct.
and you need low cost equity and debt. I think that is
Correct.
where the challenge lies. We grant money is too small to do
Absolutely.
anything around it. It's not a way of creating sustainability in the enterprise itself.
Absolutely. With you on that, and
You can't also
yeah,
subsidize the farmer because he needs to pay for it. Only then it's going to become a sustainable solution.
I get where you're coming from. Super. So,
You'll not be able to put me in a corner
sorry? No, no, no.
on the lighter note.
So, Dhruvi, as we come to the close, okay, now we've used lots of words, right? Social, we've debated what it means, impact, market based, this, that, this, that. Now, I have a question for you. So, if we have to compare the CSR sector with any other sector, what what would be a parallel that you would choose to go with?
So CSR, right? Not the whole social or
Yes,
generally the space.
yes, yes.
I think I think I will relate it to our Bollywood industry, our film industry.
Bollywood. How? Please walk me through that. I was expecting a totally different answer.
What were you expecting? Like,
Not Bollywood.
no, it's like Bollywood
Okay.
because it's people, right? It's people it's all around people, people for people, right? So Bollywood is what comes to my mind. So you have a range of so you have to relate the programs. Then they are
Yeah.
also range from your art films to your masala movies.
Okay.
And then there are actors, and there are directors, and there are producers, and they're all technicians. And that's what it really takes to bring change
Right.
is many people that come together. So it's not always the hero on the screen, right? It's people who work on the ground who are completely invisible, silent, driven by a lot of passion. And I meet some of amazing people who have chosen to do this, right? And so it's very similar to, in many ways, not just what comes on the screen, but what
Mhm.
goes behind.
Mhm.
And it's years of effort,
Mhm.
it's legacy. Uh, so, I mean, I can go deeper, but let's leave it to people's imagination to now evaluate their program based on this. Yeah, so the role
That
that we
is
play, I think, as a CSR funder, the role we play is that of a producer. And do you have hit films or flops?
and sometimes very good promotion, sometimes not. So I get the analogy. It's quite deep and quite humorous at the same time. Superb, Dhruvi. Thank you so much as we draw to a close of this
Okay,
episode. Thank you so much. I
thank
learned so much through this exchange, through our previous exchanges, and I have to say a special thank you for A, doing this on a Sunday, and B, B for doing this a second time, right?
you.
So a little bit of trivia for whoever's listening in. We actually did this entire podcast all from the beginning to the end once before till technology played spoil sport and we lost that recording. And Dhruvi has so kindly agreed and done this whole thing all over again. Thank you so much, Dhruvi. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Take care and we'll see you
Thank
soon.
you so much. Yeah, bye.
Bye.